Well, welcome everyone to Church Chat. Great to have you here on this cold and brisk morning.
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty chilly.
It's pretty chilly in the church, and but great to have your company, Josiah, as we look at the sermon and talk through um, where we've been heading with this series. So we've been in the heart surgery series.
Yeah, it's been
Tou
great.
Touch some doozies.
Yeah, definitely some doozies.
So we've looked at anger, lust, oaths and promises.
Mm.
And I described it because you preached at Parallel and I preached here at Parafield. I identified it as probably one of the hardest topics to preach about,
Mm.
and that's what to do with evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Jesus' words are tough.
Yep.
They've got all kinds of. There's lots of grey where life hits these words.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got to kind of try and navigate what's Jesus' intent, what's he trying to do, how's it all going to come across, and it's a bit of a minefield.
I think so. I think so. I think it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Because I think Jesus is calling us to some really challenging, really difficult things. And like you said, there's so much grey.
So much grey.
So much grey.
And I think that we've all heard the words. I think even if you hadn't grown up in the church, you've heard these words. You might not have heard them in the right context, but you've heard them, and they rub against people's normal attitudes towards when someone does evil to you.
Yep.
And I think that's why they're so difficult.
Oh, yeah.
So why don't you read them?
Sure thing.
And let people into what we're saying, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So I read from Matthew 5, verses 38 to 42. Here's what Jesus is saying. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so turn the other cheek. Someone sues you. One thing, give them more.
Yep.
Walk an extra mile, even though you're forced to walk 1. Give the other one away for free. Give to anyone who asks of you.
Yeah.
That's some big ticket items.
I agree.
Big ticket items. So what do you think is the things that Jesus, what's the main point do you think Jesus is trying to get to in this passage?
Yeah. I think Jesus is always wanting us to take assessment of our actions so that he can get to our hearts and go, what's our motivations behind what we're doing? Why are we doing these things?
And I think that's why we called it heart surgery, is because it's not about us feeling guilty that we are angry or that we lust or how we respond to evil. It is the fact that God wants to highlight in us that if we're responding in a certain way, that he has work to do in our heart.
Yes.
And we get a change in how we respond to evil. When someone does something bad towards you, is an important way of Jesus saying, well, how you react is a way in which you got to ask whether or not God can be at work.
Yeah. Well, how does Jesus combat evil? With self-sacrifice.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's to be a disciple and to model after that is incredibly.
Well, when you think about it, he said turn the other cheek, and he was whipped and beaten for us and without cause. When you look at it, about the cloak and the shirt, his garments were gambled away. When you look at the walk the extra mile, or you see that he had to carry the cross for us, and and when you look at giving away, that he gave away everything, and he multiplied food when he needed to.
Yeah.
So it's not like Jesus is coming to this going, this is just an ideal.
Yeah,
he lived it out.
He did,
and that's a great challenge.
It is.
For
It
us,
is. Yeah. And so we're looking at combating evil with good.
Yeah, and I think that's the main point from this. Jesus is saying, if evil is done to you, the Old Testament passage is give evil back in the measure that it's given to you.
Yeah.
So the Old Testament passage is that a tooth for a tooth and an eye for an eye. It was actually meant to contain the reaction of people so that they wouldn't go above and beyond. It wouldn't escalate.
Yes, yeah.
It would just be, okay, you caused me to lose a tooth. Now we get a pair of pliers and away we go.
Yeah.
But Jesus is saying even doing that is entering into the cycle of evil.
Yeah.
And for us being kingdom people, our journey is not to be in that cycle of evil and not to even entertain it.
Yeah.
I would say that in Jesus asking us to do more, he's saying what I want you to do is to replace evil with blessing.
Yeah.
And I think that is a huge struggle.
Yes.
So when people are doing bad things to you, when people are knocking you down and pouring you out, what is the blessing that you can give them is a difficult thing, because people are really good at abusing.
Yes, 100%.
And I don't think Jesus is saying stay in the abuse.
No.
I don't think he's giving us the message that we should just be walked over. But at the same time, how do we then not enter into the evil?
Yeah.
And I think that's where it becomes hard.
Yeah. I don't think Jesus is ever overlooking when people have committed wrong. He's saying, he's not shying away from the fact that it's going to happen. He's then calling us to a better response.
Yeah. So where's our heart in that response?
Yes, yeah.
And I don't think our heart should be just continue to let evil happen to me. I don't think that's what Jesus is saying. But how do we respond in a way that brings life, not death?
Yeah. How is it that we care for our enemies?
That's right.
Yeah.
And the difficulty is if you turn the other cheek, just on face value and not looking at it as a response in blessing.
Yeah.
Is that people can feel like they need to be stuck in evil and not have any sort of recourse. I think Jesus is saying we have a recourse. We're just going to choose what that recourse is. And so I said on Sunday, if this is not Jesus giving you permission to stay in an abusive relationship, this is Jesus saying, how do you respond to that abusive relationship?
Yeah.
And maybe the most loving and blessing thing you can do is to step out of that relationship. And that should be your response.
Yeah.
So, but that's where it all becomes
really grey.
Really grey. What do you do with war?
Yep. Oh.
And killing someone is pretty much an evil.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you want policemen to be able to go into a house and use whatever force is necessary to stop the evil happening in the house. And so, and that's the difficulty of this passage.
Well, and I think Paul in Romans touches on this really briefly, where he talks about overcoming evil with good, but he also talks about the government having authority and having a sword, and God actually allowed that to happen for our benefit and good, and that's sometimes really difficult to read. I find, sometimes I'm not really happy with the government.
And so, maybe the best, and I shared a story about my son being bullied and having long talks to him about all that's going on. And his personal power and the fact that this kid was trying to take from him his sense of worth, his sense of dignity, his personal power, and how that's probably been ripped away from him, and that's why he's trying to grab it. I don't think my 10-year-old son understood anything I was saying.
No, that's okay.
But I wanted to talk through the fact that, this doesn't happen in isolation. Like there's a bigger things that are at play. But in the end, I just said, look, if the only way that you can preserve your inner you and stop this evil from happening to you is to clonk the kid. Yeah. Then clonk the kid.
I've got a similar story. At school we had we loved the game handball.
Yeah.
But there was one particular lad, and he was being very domineering. He was controlling the game for his favour, and he was picking on another student. And I just got fed up. So fed up. I was like, you're targeting him. You're picking on him. Wow. And I bolted. Like, I was so distraught after I'd slapped this dude. Because he was bigger than me. It was not going to go well for me. But I was just so fed up that this thing was happening, and I knew it was wrong. And I felt like it was the only way I could deal with it.
Now, I don't know if me giving, I said to him, I said, look, I never want you to start a fight.
Yeah.
I said, and I always want this to be a last resort, but if it's the last resort and that's what you need to do to stop it from happening, then do it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure even now if that's the right thing to say.
I understand that. Yeah.
But I also know that you need to have a really good understanding of who God is.
Yep.
And who you are in God for you to be able to resist evil in the way that Jesus is talking about.
Yeah.
So I'd expect that of me, that if someone came and tried to bully me, well, good luck to them. That's number one. But number two, I'm old enough and wise enough now that I've got my own internal sense of who I am and who I am in God, and that if someone tried to come and bully me, I could probably resist that without, whether it was physical, emotional, I could probably resist that pretty well, and want to bless them in return. I'm not sure I could ask the same thing of my 10-year-old son.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Because I don't think he had that wealth of understanding and wealth of things. So I don't want to discount what Jesus is saying, and at all, but I just want to say that there's lots of grey in this. Yeah. And it's a difficult passage.
Yeah. I think that the key thing is that Jesus always wants us to be free. And I think that freedom to let God have control and to let God judge between the two individuals or parties, or to let God enact justice to God, allowing God to have like full control over our circumstances can be super freeing.
And I'm not even sure that in this passage, continuing to think about it, that Jesus is actually advocating that God's going to step in if you do these things.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yep.
He's saying, what is your heart in response to evil being to him? And his response when he went to the cross was, well, I'm going there because I love people, and that's the way it is. And we need to be on a journey of allowing God to work in our hearts that we can get to that point.
Yes.
I just don't think we should feel guilty if we're not quite there yet.
No.
Or expect that of 10-year-old kids in the playground.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't advocate violence for the sake of violence. Or, we're not doing that. So there's movement in that area. Yeah. I mean, it's the same with, give to anyone who asks. And I find that far easier than the turn the other cheek one. Because basically God is saying the money's not yours anyway. If people force you to give them money, then just give it. It's just money.
Yeah.
We put a far more emphasis on money than what God does. I mean, God's the God of 1,000 cattle on the hill, and we're the ones who think that whether we do or don't have enough.
Mm.
And money's one of those things that you never, no matter how much you never have enough.
No.
And, so I find that one easier.
Yeah, I understand that.
But the violence one I find quite difficult. So I think the generosity one is one that probably affects us more. I mean, we don't live in an overly violent society.
No, we don't.
But, there are people who are in violent situations and they need to take account of it. But I think we are in a society where we love money more than we should, and giving it away is harder than it should be.
Yeah.
And I think that these words can speak to us. I think, the walking the extra mile, I called it the evil of obligation.
Yeah.
And I think that it's easy to feel obliged to do stuff. And when we feel obliged to do stuff, we're not doing it in the right spirit. And I think that can be a real danger.
Yeah, and I think that can happen even in our volunteer space at church. We just feel like, I've been doing this for so many years. I got to keep doing this because no one else will do it. And sometimes we can get quite dark and kind of bitter because we just feel obliged to serve other people and love other people. And I don't think God wants us to be bound by that.
No, and you're right. I mean, you can be resentful, you can become embittered, you can...
Yeah.
The other one is, the one, if they sue you for a shirt, they give them a cloak as well. And, we can feel that like we have rights and people can violate our rights. And that's the whole thing of taking people to court, and it's easy to get upset and to have our hearts churn.
Definitely.
And, wonder why the world is so unfair and all those sorts of things. And I think God wants us to be free of all those kind of things. And is that the way to do that is to be generous, or is to bless when the evil comes.
And how much harmony in society this would create if everyone came on board, you know. How many neighborhood squabbles would be resolved because we're just like, I just want to bless you.
But that's the sin in the world, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
That always leads people to want to be selfish and want to be self-indulgent or self-reliant.
Yeah.
And this really is a countercultural message that comes in, and I think that's why we struggle with it. Yeah. Because we want justice, or we want to be angry, or we want to be bitter, but it doesn't do anything for our heart and soul. Yeah. So I'm wondering how you guys went with this passage. I'm not sure if we've got anyone ticking along, but drop a comment when you watch this, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook, and let us know, because I think it's a tricky one.
I agree.
And I think that there are lots of nuances to this. And I suppose, we want to get back to the point where this whole Sermon on the Mount is Jesus asking us to check our heart. Yeah. And so if this is something that you really struggle with, then ask God to explore what your heart is doing and how he can help.
Yeah, definitely.
Because he does want us to live free.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Anything else wisdom you want to drop on the table?
No, I think it's good. Yeah.
Well, we hope that you've been enjoying the series like we do. We've got Nathan coming up on Sunday. He's back from his overseas little trip, and he's going to be sharing the next part of the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Yeah. All right. Well, until we see you in person or online, God bless.
We'll see you soon.